No, many animals are unnecessarily sacrificed by the very harsher way and increase the fundamental animal rights, the avoiding the unnecessary pain. We should, and moreover, we think that the religion should and religion can change their own belief and their own process. Therefore, we totally protect animals and propose this motion. So, firstly, I'd like to define this model. Secondly, I'm going to explain two things in my speech. Firstly, how principally government should not allow this cruel process of the animal uniquely. And secondly, how such kind of other kind of situation, why this kind of cruel process is especially unnecessary even if there is religious peace. And my partner explained that how after taking this proposal, there even in the conservative area, there is a discussion about the animal process cruelty, and they can change their belief, their process. So back to the division. Okay, this is all countries. If there is a religious that impose harsher treatment towards for the sacrifices. So we simply ban the process of the harsher treatment. But the important thing is we don't ban the ritual of the sacrifice itself, but we only ban the process, the very cruel process that involves prolonged pain. So in the situation that we after taking this policy, religion use sacrifice and kill animal without any kind of pain, such as cutting the neck and the very fastly kill. So having defined this motion, I'd like to explain as a starting. So firstly, why principally government should ban this clear process? Firstly, we know that government admits the use of the animals, and if it's the right of, to some extent, if it's the right of animal right to live, because that is as far as that is necessary and need very necessary. And that means that human cannot live without such kind of animal engagement life. For example, we already allow many countries eating meat and to some extent abuse animals and live. The reason is that is necessary. So the government allow. But in particular these cases, this kind of process is totally unnecessary, right? So such kind of prolonged pain is strongly banned. Why it is? Because this kind of animal also have the right. The already government admits that this kind of animals right to especially avoid and feel unreasonable harsh pain, right? So already other kind of situation, government strongly ban the unnecessary animal abuse, the unnecessary animal killing, cruel killing, and if other kind of situation you do such kind of unnecessary killing, you are very strongly punished by other animal abuse. That is the current context. Yes.
So some people like vegetarian don't think that this is necessity to eating meat. How do you define this necessity?
Vegetarian is very specific people. Or average reasonable person who eat very and meat is very necessary for protein, right? So this is because why? So in this situation, because that situation, that is the constitution injustice of the government, because they overlook even there is a harsh animal rights and harsh animal abuse rights. And we believe the process of the process of the religion of the animal abuse is totally unnecessary from two perspectives. Second argument. Firstly, regardless of the process, the religious purpose can be achieved. Why is it? So let's think, what is the religious sacrifice and religious nature? That means send the sacrifice towards God and give the benefit to other God in exchange for God protection in order to seek the God protection. Right? So we must consider that the sacrifice itself, killing animal itself is important simply because if we burn such kind of things, where there is a severe mental health for religious people, such as the fear of the punishment of the God, or etc. etc. But we believe that the process is the severe punishment of the severe continuously prolonged pain of the process is totally unnecessary because as you know, regardless of the process, the last purpose sent to the sacrifice towards the God is totally does not change. Right? So in this situation, that is totally unnecessary. The killing the animal is the severe cruel way is totally unnecessary, and the purpose does not change. And secondly, religion can change, because if the government impose and said the law that the religious should change, the religious people can concede and can change to some extent and compromise their beliefs. For example, there are many examples. For example, the Islamic nation, even that does not admit that that did not admit right of the female. In today's context, many Islamic nations admit the female to get the education, to get them many Islamic nations. Moreover, second example is that many Catholic Church strongly ban the use of the condom, but another kind of context, many Catholic Church concede the use of the condom and allow the believers to use the condom. That means that why it is because or even some religious they began to consider the life of the animals and can change. That means their belief does not so harm. Therefore, that is unnecessary. Process is unnecessary. We should ban.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the criteria that the government guarantee should be extent of the right should be in the level that the government recognize as a valid citizen do not sacrifice their life as citizens, and also under the status quo because of and under the status quo many people can follow the one dogmas, so they are satisfied their following that. However, after taking this proposal, they can never prioritize one dogma, one belief. So it is very problem. So we strongly oppose this motion. First of all, I'd like to repeat what government said that, and also I'd like to explain my point. And today I talk about two refutation for them. First of all, they say that process we should ban if it is animal abuse, we should ban those things. They say that. But for example, under the status quo, we government allows the animal testing, right? Because to make medicine is necessary for them, right? And also animal testing might be abuse for animals because after animal testing, all of the animals should die. No, thank you. Because without die, we cannot check the medicine is work well or not. So the argument is not true. And also, no, thank you. And also, religious, they say that religious cannot never change. They say that religious can change. They say, but it is not true because before century, like over 2,000 years ago, your grandfather tell you about your children, and then that children tell about children, and then that children tell about your children the dogma, right? So like this, many of huge of time they are protected those of dogma. Why we suddenly change those of religious and belief? No, thank you. So it's impossible idea. They are idealistic, optimistic idea, right? So we cannot believe their process. Their mechanism is so weak. Let me move my point. Today I talk about no, thank you. Sit down, please. I talk about two things. First of all, why government respect morality, and second point, why after taking this proposal it is harmful for religious peoples. First of all, no, thank you. first of all, why government respect the morality? Value itself is a very, we cannot decide what is the justice and what is the injustice as a value of morality. What's the value is a wrong or right? No thinking. It is a controversial thing, right? So we cannot, no one can choose what the value is the best. And also each citizen have each value, right? And that necessity depend on that one belief, right? For example, some people, of course, most of people eat meat, beef or pork, or etc. However, as my partner already pointed out that some people are vegetarian, right? They decided not to eat meat, right? However, and vegetarians have one value, so government need to prioritize both of values. So we have, so we can, so under the status quo, government respect the value, each of value, and then we can, we are allowed to eat meat under the status quo. And this motion is applicable because some people believe specific religion, right? So after taking this proposal, those people cannot to do that ritual. So that is a very problematic because they can't sustain the religious. So we strongly propose that government necessary to respect the one morality. No, thank you. So we should not oppose this. We strongly oppose this motion. No, thank you. No, thank you, Sita, please. Let me move on my second point about why after taking this proposal they will be harmful. Under the status quo, government allowed to kill the animals in pain-free. So many of citizens who believe that religion, specific religion, can do that or ritual. So that is a very important thing because dogma written that how to kill the animals, how to kill the animals, and those of animals like a pig or a cow is a very dirty things, like unclear things for them. So you should not eat that. And also dogma show you how to kill that. For example, first of all, you should cut the pig's neck, or you should put off the pig's eye and take off the oil, etc. Like this. Dogma showing how to kill, right? And also, they can follow the dogmas under the status quo, and also they can sustain the religion. However, after taking this proposal, government do not allow to kill the animals in pain-free. So that is a problem. Before that, yes, please.
So if dogma say you should sacrifice a human, in this situation already government bans this because there's a trend to respect human rights.
Under the status quo, of course, every dogmas do not say that we should kill we should do that murder or etc. And also, in these cases, we should without to kill the animals. Many people will suffer because of religious. So they are pointed out it's not true. And let me continue my speech. No, thank you. Let me continue my speech. After taking this proposal, those are people who believe that religious cannot to kill the animal in pain-free. As I say that, those are dogmas say that we necessary to kill the animals in pain-free. If you don't follow the dogmas, you might go hell, or you never continue the life, or you should be die, or etc. Like this, dogma saying those are things. And also, after taking this proposal, their belief and act will contradictory with one belief and one acting, right? So it is a very serious problem for citizens who believe the religious, specific religious, because those of people believe specific religious for long time, years ago, when they are child, right? So why suddenly government necessary to change those of act, those of belief? It is impossible, and also their idea would contradict between the ideas and act. So it is very harmful, major harmful for citizens who believe specific religions. For this reason, first of all, government need to protect moral and idea or value, and also after taking this proposal, many people are harmful. So for this reason, we strongly oppose this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Government
government allows values so long, but government does allow all sorts of values. But government can restrict in cases when it brings upon harm, when it brings upon unnecessary harm. Like we don't sacrifice people's lives just because of religion. We don't allow sacrificing these animals, especially in a painful way, which we think is unnecessary for the religion as a whole. We can actually change this kind of religion. We can actually change. We cannot dismiss the rights of the animals, and that is why we are very proud to propose this motion. Firstly, some refutations. The objects I gave talked about animal testing and those kind of things. But firstly, in cases of animal testing, yes, we will minimize the harm on animals. We will decrease the prolonged harm that will be brought upon from animal testing. But more than that, if it brings upon prolonged harm, yes, then maybe we'll ban it. If it brings upon prolonged harm, we have supercomputers, for example. We can actually theoretically check the safety of it. So we can do this in this way, that's not the issue. And also moving on to my issue. Firstly, I want to talk about the importance of animal rights. And secondly, I want to talk about how the religion will actually change. So moving on to my first issue. So as a social consensus, social norm, we think that animal right is important because we think that they are same as humans. Humans to some extent, because they have the same kind of feelings. If they have the same kind of emotions, they feel that something hurts when you are for example, cut by a knife and those kind of things. You actually feel harm in these kind of cases as well. So we see that because in these kind of senses, humans and animals are the same. We respect animal rights as a whole. But look, there are cases when you have to kill animals. But in these kind of cases, we have kind of restrictions. We have a principle called the 3R principle: refinement and reduction and replacement. Maybe we might conduct it in a minimum way. Maybe it's the only way, but we can reduce the amount of pain that will be brought upon to these animals. For example, in Europe, we don't put birds in cages at all because we think it is unnecessary pain. It is a prolonged pain that is unnecessary. We humans only need to get the meat from the birds, so we don't need to make these kind of prolonged unnecessary pain as well. So in terms of the refinement, we think that the consequence is enough for the religion, which my partner said, and which I also elaborate in my argument. So because of in these religions, we think that the goal of these religions is to send, for example, the soul of the animal to the god, offer this kind of soul to the god. So we think that we can achieve it. So we think that this is the goal of these religions. So we think that actually sacrificing animals in a prolonged way, in a prolonging suffering is unnecessary way. So moving on to my second issue. So how this religion will actually change. But before that,
so about reducing pain, that anybody gain benefits, right, from this making them getting pain. But in this case, this religious believer gets sacrificed because they cannot continue the ritual.
Well, in the first place, we think that unnecessary killing is not important at all for this religion, which I would like to elaborate in my argument. So firstly, moving on to my issue. So we can actually change. Because a couple of decades, or a couple of centuries ago, religion actually sacrificed human lives for their own religion. But we can see that this kind of infringing the human rights and those kind of things was wrong as a social norm. So in the first place, we can see, historically speaking, that religion can actually change the dogma if it's wrong. But more importantly, because we take the proposal, this religion will be able to change. But first, because in the first place, the areas that are not conservative will likely to change. In the first place, they would like to adapt to the society, for example, in terms of abortion or enhancing the women's rights. So because they don't want their religion to be dismissed, or they don't want to be punished in those kind of things, they stop these kind of, or change these kind of things in the first place. They stop these kind of changes in the first place. But more importantly, especially in the conservative areas, we will be able to much more protect this kind of religion because if we take this proposal, we will have much more discussion after taking this proposal. Because in the status quo, there's absolutely no discussion. Because there's not much incentive for this religion to actually change. Because I have three reasons. Firstly, philosophically speaking, justifying speaking, the government can't overlook actions that are actually brutally giving suffering pain to these animals. So in the first place, and philosophically speaking, we can't justify this. But secondly, because the government doesn't take this kind of proposal, like government is saying that like it is okay, you can actually like kill animals in means of prolonging pain to these animals. So like they're saying that it is okay to like actually continue on giving prolonged pain to these animals as well. But more than that, even if there's a social norm and those kind of things, we think that in these kind of conservative areas, we think that these people don't think it's much because like they don't think it is illegal. So like in the status quo, there is no discussion, and like because of these cases, like for example in the status quo, like maybe newcomers don't come into this kind of religion. So like in these kind of cases, maybe there's a natural selection, and the number of people in this kind of religion is decreasing. So like we see a harm in the status quo because there is no discussion and because the number is decreasing, not taking. But however, after taking this proposal, we will see much more activation in the discussion. We will more likely activate it. Because like, there might be some people who want to continue on with this religion, even though they are punished and those kind of things. But there are those that think that punishment is something that they don't think is necessary. They don't want to be like, they don't want to conduct actions that are illegal. They don't want to be like penetrated or those kind of things. So like through this discussion, maybe they will reach a consensus that the goal of this religion, in order to sacrifice the animal, is only to like send their soul to the God. They might think that brutally killing this animal is necessary, unnecessary. So in this kind of discussion, through these kind of cases, we can actually change this kind of religion. But so like comparatively speaking, we can actually through the discourse that we can have after taking the proposal, we can actually protect the conservative religion because like comparatively speaking, in the status quo, through the natural selection, because newcomers don't come in, it is decreasing. But however, after taking this proposal, because the religion actually changes the dogma, yeah, they will be able to continue on their religion. But more than that, because it's a socially accepted norm, maybe newcomers will actually come into this kind of religion. So comparatively speaking, in our paradigm, we will be able to protect the religion much better, and that is why I'm very proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay, so we believe that this action is absolutely necessary for this believer. And that's why we think we should allow this motion. We should not take this plan. And we think this ritual and giving harm pain to the animal is absolutely necessary to keep their religion, to respect the gods. We think that this plan is if we want to protect human beings, we think we should not take this plan. So today I'm going to explain three things in my speech. First of all, I want to explain our assumption, which is about why government prioritizes human beings over animals, and why in today's case we should prioritize religious believers' rights than animal rights. But second of all, I want to explain the benefit of status quo, how this is actually really benefit for this keeper to keep their religion, and how after taking this plan, this is crucially bad for them that they cannot keep their life, which is so harmful for the believer, which is a human, who are human beings, that we should respect, we should protect. So before that, I'd like to repeat the previous speaker. So first of all, previous speaker told us about, like as I said in POI, as they said, like, in the testing, in the government, in our society, we try to reduce the pain of animals. But the difference between that kind of example and today's case is that in their case, is that anybody else gain benefits, right? For example, in animal testing, we make them gain pain. Of course, nobody gain from benefits, right? We should try to reduce the pain, right? But today's case is totally different. Today's case is that, as I said, these believers get sacrificed. This believers' identity will be denied. These believers cannot continue their religion in ritual, Mr. Speaker. That's why we think today's case, that example, is completely different, and we think that we should respect these humans' rights. But moreover, second of all, he told us, which was kind of confusing, because he told us unnecessary killing is not good. Unnecessary killing should not be bad. On the other hand, their model is that they still allow this believer to kill, right? They just reduce this pain, right? But when they say unnecessary killing is bad, isn't good, then I don't understand why today's model, these believers will still be able to kill these animals, right? But third of all, he told us about benefit for the believers. We think, first of all, that kind of benefit is not affirmed in today's model. Today's model, what they're trying to protect is animals' rights, right? So we think the protect these believers' rights is absolutely not connected to their stance. We think there was an inconsistency of stance in the first place. Moreover, we don't think discussion is not going to happen because the lack of their problem is that they didn't explain the character of today's context, right? Today's target. Today's target is the ones who are kind of extreme and believe in some religion. We're not talking about Christians who are kind of mild, right? Who always discuss about their religion and try to change, etc. We're talking about today extreme ones who do this kind of killing animals and try to torture animals. I think it's kind of weird, but we think this happens. They are the ones who are extreme. They are the ones who live in local, like for example Africa, etc. And they are the ones who are kind of conservative about their ideas, right? We don't think that taking this plan doesn't incentivize to think about their religion. We think because it's characteristic of their religion, we think they still believe in their religion, no thank you, and their strong idea, that plan is not going to incentivize to discuss. So move on to my first issue, why government prioritize over human beings, but yes. Okay. So why government over animal is that obviously that was kind of we think that because in many reasons government prioritizes human beings, right? In many ways. Because of the, for example, like social contract, right? Government people follow the law, people pay taxes, etc. And the government has an obligation to protect humans' rights, right? That's why in many cases, for example, we allow people to eat animal meat because even though we're killing animal, or we allow people to have zoo because even though this is sometimes harmful for the animals, right? We think if there's a necessity for human beings, we should allow these humans' rights and prioritize humans' rights because humans are the first priority for the government to protect, and the animals, unfortunately, it's second in a society. And this value, this necessity, it depends on the value of the individual, Mr. Speaker. And this value is totally different to person. As I said, ordinary people don't think that ordinary people think that this is necessary to eat meal, but some vegetarians don't feel necessary, right? This is absolutely not necessary to eat meal. So thank you. This is each individual value is totally different to person. And what we should do is we think government should try to respect this individual value, right? And to maximize their happiness. That we are the one who protect this human beings. And even though in today's case, the religious believers are killing this animal and giving a lot of pain to the animals, they are human beings, and they are the one the government should protect. And we think that, especially we allow these people to continue their religions, right? This religion is valid. This religion is protected by the government. No, thank you. That's the reason we should actively protect and prioritize this human's right over the animal's right. So that's why we see huge. So why this huge necessity, right? That's what I'm going to explain next. Okay.
So we know that each individual's value is important. The question is what that override animals' right unnecessary?
The reason why we think this is necessary, right? That's what I'm going to explain. So first of all, I want to explain why indigenous with these benefits, right? As my friend already told you, because they can sustain the religion. But why this is important? Because now they're giving pain to the animal. That's the way they respect God, right? I don't know exactly. I mean, nobody in this room knows how they work. But we think that's the way they try to respect the God and respect more and more and strengthen their belief and keep their ritual and respect their ideas, right? And that's the religion that they believe. And because of they can continue this, they can sustain and continue their religion. They can continue to feel that they are strong, or they can feel safe by protecting by the God, etc. Right? That's why this is crucially important. Their religion is connected to their life, Mr. Speaker. That's why we think this is very benefit and important for these human beings. But if we take this one, we think this is huge harm, huge negative harm will happen to this religious believer. Because as I said, this giving pain to animal, the other one who try to respect God more and more, and that's the way they being protected. But because they cannot do it, they feel like they cannot. They don't obey the God, they cannot continue their ritual, they're not respecting the God. In that case, they feel like they are, they feel like they have huge unrespect to the God. For example, they become so fear, they will have so much huge fearness, meaning that maybe God is going to give you penalty, or God is not going to protect you, etc. This fear connects to their own life. Maybe, for example, these believers cannot go outside and cry or apologize to the God all day. We think this is huge harm for them to continue their life. Because religion itself connects to life are really, really strong, right? Some believers, for example, die because of the religions, right? We think this religion and life is hugely connected, Mr. Speaker. That's why we think today's case, giving pain, yes, maybe nobody in this room cannot understand how this works or how this is important, but for this believer, it's extremely important to sustain their life, Mr. Speaker. That's why we see the huge necessity for them to protect. But if we take this harm, the huge harm happen to these people, and for them, they cannot continue the necessity, Mr. Speaker. That's why to respect their value, we should oppose this motion. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, even if religious dogma never ever change, in this situation, government should not say it's okay to killing animals with the so harsh situation. That's why we're standing here. Even that this kind, because we consistently say that this kind government is only after to protect the animals. Only government can protect the animals. That's why the status quo and this kind of norm exists. So, and moreover is contrary to say, even this changeable situation that happen, just keeping the status quo is harmful towards religious people itself. My Deputy Prime Minister clearly explained to this point. After implementing policy, it's a beneficial towards the religious believer itself. But unfortunately, I'm sad, but no engagement coming from the opposition side. It's a sort of crucial failure coming from the government side. So we want to protect animals, but also we want to protect religion. It's the consensus of this debate. The problem is how that happened. So I want to explain the 2 points in my speech. One is about the necessity to take this motion. The secondly, I want to explain about the effect of taking this motion. I want to explain one by one. The first is about yes.
You said that animals is a very important thing, so that's why you standing here. You said that, but which is better for government to protect animal rights or human rights?
In the first place, even after implement the policy, never ever we infringe human rights so harsh. No, thank you. Because this kind of revision is a changeable. The status quo, we can see many examples. No, thank you. In the Philippine government teach the safe sex in the Catholic Church exists. In the Malaysia, it's also the Islamic country, but the government gives a compulsory education to women. It's completely against the dogma of Islamic. But because this kind of trend exists, the right of the women and men, in this situation, this kind of religious body, the change because it's never ever infringe these kind of things. So in terms of this point, their assumption is that the believer is never ever change this identity. But it's so unrealistic. So I want to deal with the necessity. So they say that we should discuss about the extreme, the conservative area. Yes, I consider it. Even in this, no thank you. In this is a program. Because they clearly ignore the trend. They ignore this kind of the animal rights. That's why the government as a government, it is the only actor to stop it. That's why we must take this motion. Because the status quo, we can see the clear program, the unnecessary pain exists. Unfortunately, in their paradigm, no explanation how to deal with this program. It's so crucial coming from government side. And what we say is in this extreme case, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, unfortunately, because no newcomer, never the thinking, the killing the animal is so harsh in harsh situation. It's clearly different from the norm and the religious value. That's why this kind the newcomer is so its number is so comparatively reduced. In this situation, the religious cannot sustain their religious value instead. That's why this motion is quite necessary. Because after implement policy, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, the government say you should not torture this kind of animal. In this situation, maybe in the religious community, they stop this kind of stop this kind of torture and discussion happen. We should do that one. In this situation, we can change this kind of believer can understand, oh, it is a social norm. No, thank you. Many people respect animal rights, so they can understand these kind of things. That's why no religious community sacrifice people in the status quo. Because everyone says human life is important. Because human life is over the religious value. This kind of trend exists. That's why this motion is more beneficial towards religious people itself. The secondary, so they say that killing is if the Prime and the opposition say we are inconsistency, but we never ever think so. Because the killing is necessary. Because sending the animal toward the goat is necessary to see the belief dogma. And it's the same thing eating the animal. They say the vegetarian, but no, the other fact, the other people, as historically, the human eating animal in every sphere. In this situation, we can see the clear necessity. No, thank you. If the bad eating animal is so harmful towards the citizen, I don't like this kind of situation. Which means that we can see the necessity. We can see necessity to eat the animal. In this situation, that's why we are allowing to kill the people without the pain. It is so harmful. Suddenly they say that we should prioritize the human right over the animal right. In the first place, in terms of this point, their assumption is that after implement policy, always infringe the religious value. In this situation, it's so unrealistic because in the first place, as I said before, if this motion if government implemented this policy, in religious community, the discussion will happen. In this situation, they must thinking, how to follow the dogma without the torture. They can seek these kinds of things. That's why, as I said before, the many religious persons change the religious dogma, and they can also believe, they can also protected by God. This is a fact. Even that they use a condom, never ever got anger and to kill someone. This example clearly show you that we can see their religious identity. So, and thirdly, I want to explain about the effect, and then I want to explain about the effect after taking this motion. So, no, as I said before, the government side is never engaged on the after implement policy that we can directly give the benefit towards the community itself. It's also the harm because keeping the status quo is also the harmful towards the religious community itself. Suddenly they say after implement the policy that no one cannot follow the dogma, and it's also the harmful toward him. Indeed, even in this situation, we must compare what is which side we can compromise because of these kinds of religious dogma, the change, or because according to the norm, the other fact, this kind of norm, the change. That's why he proposed.
Thank you. Some failure of the affirmative. One, they never say the impact of the protection of the animal. How that is important, that is, in sacrificing the human right that religious people have. So they never explain on that point. And more than that, they never say why the government can why the social norm that the affirmative belief is absolutely right in the first place. They never told you the validity of the value or the social norm. And more than that, the lack of definition of a necessity and unnecessity is quite problematic. They never define what is the necessity for the individual, what is the unnecessity of the individual. Their criteria is actually just an assertion. Two things to talk about. One, the legitimacy, or which we have to prioritize human beings or animals, and two, importance of the process of the slaughtering or the religious value, one by one. So first of all, they say, the criteria should be necessity. But as I told you, what is necessity in the first place? For religious people, the process is so important and necessary to continue to be a believer. We think that should be in the range of the necessity. Actually, they never say why the criteria of the necessity is completely stable and completely valid. And some analogy coming from that side is compulsory female education and condom in the Catholic Church or something like that. One, about compulsory female education, we are happy to abolish that. We're happy to make it voluntary education in the first place. About the condom, yes, that policy, that changing is just autonomous, right? It is not the forcement in the first place. And more than that this changing the dogma is just allow or give another choices for believers that do not cut down the option that the believer can have, right? It means it can't be the intervention or the invasion of the life of the individual in the first place. And more than that, the extent of the right, we told you, extent of the animal right should be in the level that no one, that the government recognizes as valid citizens, do not sacrifice themselves in the first place. We do think, because it is just clearly the sacrifice for the religious people, we think that should not be, that should be allowed. The POI from you is, why the human beings can overcome the animal. The answer is, considering the certainty of the contribution to the society or the government, it was quite clear that human beings do much more contribution compared with animals. How can we say the animal do contribution to the government or the society? The answer coming from that side. We think that POI from Tatsumi was, if the dogma says no thank you, if the dogma says you can't kill the people or something like that, yes, we think in that situation priority of the human beings is much same. That's why we can't kill other people or other human beings. That is not applicable in this case. No thank you. And yes, and he said contradictory because about eating meat. Historically, it is allowed. It should be allowed. So religious value is historically allowed. So let's allow them. Right? We think that is much legitimate. That is a clear contradiction coming from their side of the house. No, thank you. Then next thing, importance of the process or the slaughtering. So or their changing or division or something like that. Well. The Prime Minister told you somehow that without this process, somehow the dedication to the God is possible. But we don't think so. The Islamic dogma says only meat that the Muslim can eat is the one that is purified through the process that the religious dogma says, right? It means for the people that believe that dogma, that the meat do not have that process is not purified. It means it is really dirty meat. It is just a kind of sin for them. It is just an invasion to the individual in the first place. We don't think the government has the justification to force people to be invaded. And more than that, the religion can change. The discussion will happen or things like that. As we told you, autonomous change is okay. But why the forcement can be allowed in this specific context? They never told us the reason why they can do that. Yes?
So keeping the status quo is harmful towards the religious community. Keeping the status quo, in this situation, the religious value is a disappear. In this situation, you cannot, what do you want to protect?
Actually, I don't think the religious value would disappear so suddenly. For some people, that would continue, and for some people, it would disappear. But we think as long as liberal democracy have to guarantee the respect to each individual's value, we think even if it is minority, we have the duty to protect the certain kinds of value. And yes, we say, and as I told you, that social norm that side of the house believe is not something concretely good, right? Why the social norm is perfectly good? They never explain why and how that is good. And more than that, don't think the newcomer will come or so forth. Then one, why the forcement is good, and after newcomer, and two, the newcomer actually come without this policy, like the founding people or people in the school or whatsoever. So we think this policy is not uniquely needed in the first place. And about the discussion, right? Without this policy, it is actually done in current situation. Because pro-discourse of the religious value exists and anti-discourse of the religious value already exists in a society. And more than that, considering indigenous society or the value of this kind of society, yes, for westernized value, it might be seen as immoral or so forth. But actually, in that situation, the discourse is actually happening because they think it is just immoral. But we think the discourse should be fair and the government should not intervene on this situation. That's why we say that the individual autonomy should be respected because it is the discourse can influence individual in this situation. Simple comparison. We think the priority of the human beings should be the priority should be put on human beings. And they never explain why it should be same, just because the function is quite similar as human beings. Actually, that's the failure of that side of it. We think because the priority is on the human beings can be prioritized. Real course.
Okay, first of all, again, we didn't see impact from the affirmative bench, right? Impact of protecting animal and why this is so important and why this importance overwhelms this human rights, Mr. Speaker. And we think that we are the one who put the negative impact to the religious believer, and principally the reason we are the one we told you the reason why we should respect this value, because this value is totally different person to person, and that's the way we maximize their happiness, the way oppose this motion say. So to sum up this way, I'm going to tell you 2-3 things. First of all, about principally should we allow or not, and second of all, I'll compare status quo with the importance of benefit and harm. And also I'll compare the after plan, if their harm is more important or their benefit is more important or our harm is more important. Or I'll compare the benefit and harm. Okay. So first of all, at the principle level. So today's affirmative bench said, if it's not necessary for human beings, we should protect animals. That's a very basic idea from affirmative bench. But we are the one who told you there's no applicability to this case, because we are the one who told you this is absolutely necessary. And this was actually touched on in this case, right? Today's action is necessary or not for the religious believer. For today's affirmative bench was absolutely just assumption, right? They just say this is not necessary. They just continue. They can continue their belief when they just kill the animal, and that's fine. But that's the assumption. The reason why we told you this is very important, because torturing an animal is the one which one can actually try to respect more God and that's the way they ritual, and historically that's the way they do it, right? We think nobody in this room can understand their action maybe, but that's the way they do it, and absolutely, because it's necessary, they are doing this ritual, Mr. Speaker. We think that absolutely there is huge necessity for these believers. And we are the one who told you, because this necessity is totally different from person to person, because its value is different from person to person. And that's why, as a government, because we protect human rights, like human beings, over the animal rights, we should respect this value, which maximizes their happiness, Mr. Speaker. We think we should actively allow this choice, especially because this religion is legitimate in our society, and because that's the way they feel this is necessary to continue their ritual. So, second, I'll compare the status quo, their harm and our benefit. We think their harm is that these animals can continue to torture. But again, they didn't explain any impact. Why protecting the animal from that kind of situation? It's so important, and why is so benefit? And they didn't explain. They didn't even compare why they protecting this animal from that situation and human rights over human rights. So we didn't see any impact from that. But we are the one who told you actually this is very beneficial, because now they can continue their religion and ritual. Now they can feel safe. They can continue their beliefs. So that's why they can be protected by the God more and more, by respecting God more and more, by torturing, right? We think that's the benefit for these humans' life, because religion and life is totally connected, and that makes their life much better, right? It creates positive impact on these people's ordinary life, Mr. Speaker. That's why in terms of the impact, and in terms of because government prioritizes human rights, which never really refuted from the government we think because of this thing in the status quo that is much better. But let's see after plan. Is their harm is animal we will protect them. Again, no impact. But another minor point was discussion will occur and they will change the dogma. They didn't explain any reason why we have to force them to change. The moment they didn't analyze the character of today's topic. We are the ones who told us the character of today's context and how this is impossible to change because this is historically given and because they are the one really conservative, which is not easy to change. But we are the ones who told you clear harm after taking this plan. Because of the fairness, because they cannot continue this ritual, this huge fairness creates negative impact on their life. We told you some believer commit suicide because of religion. We think after taking this plan, not only they will just depress, etc., but maybe some will commit suicide or with etc., huge harm on their life. That means government cannot protect these humans' rights and life, Mr. Speaker. That's why we think today's action is absolutely necessary for the believer. That's why we oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Millions of animals are suffering due to the prolonged pain. This fact is enough. This is the seriousness that we have in the status quo. Why can you say, as a government, that you can neglect the rights of these animals? The animals, they are actually suffering in the status quo. But more than that, we think that religion can change and must change for the religion to continue on in order to protect the religion. And that is why I'm very proud to propose this motion. I have three things to talk about. Firstly, in terms of practical benefit. Secondly, in terms of prolonged pain so necessary and must not change this kind of religion. And thirdly, I want to talk about, can we like actually prioritize human rights over animal rights? So like moving on to my first issue. So like I told you that in the status quo, we're actually infringing the animal rights. But more than especially in the conservative areas, the religion is dying because like no newcomers actually come. So like in order to protect these religion, they have to adapt to this new to the society that we have now. Alright, so like after taking this proposal, yeah, we will be able to protect the animal rights, but more importantly, we will be able to protect the religion and change it so that it will be accustomed to the situation that we have in the status quo. Through the discussion and that we have, we will more likely be able to change. We will be able to change it. Prolonging pain is wrong, principally and practically. We need this, so in order for, especially for the conservative religion, to actually be protected, we must take this proposal, which the opposition side completely neglected and refuted. Moving on to my second issue. So like, it's like prolonging pain so necessary. So like the opposition side continuously said that, look, it is so necessary to continue on the religious value. This is something that is so important and must not change at all. So like, if it's so absolute and must not change at all, and like the government must not intervene in order to ensure the happiness of the people, then why do we actually change the religion in terms of sacrificing the humans in those countries, or like introducing safe sex to these religious communities? Why are the government actually forcing the religion to actually change their dogma and stop their action? We can actually see a change, and when we see that this kind of rights is infringed, we can actually change it. So like we see that even this kind of necessity is not an absolute criteria to like neglect this kind of option. We think that this kind of dogma is not absolute, this kind of process is not absolute. Moving on to it, so like we see that we can change it if the animal is receiving harm, but more importantly, in terms of the third issue, can we actually like prioritize human rights over animal rights? Well, yes, maybe you can like kill animals to some extent or those kind of things, but like this is not the reason to abuse these animals. It is not the reason to prolong the pain of these animals at all. We can't allow unnecessary pain because we see that humans and animals have the same kind of feeling especially in terms of feeling pain. Why can you do things that you don't actually do to humans at all? The opposite side suddenly say, look, like contribution in terms of tax is the criteria and those kind of things. But like if that is the reason, then we can like give pain towards children. This is not the criteria that we want. Because like animals receive the same kind of pain, we can't like unnecessarily give upon pain at all. We can only allow like killing animals when it's minimizing the killing, and it's the only way, and when we minimize the pain. And for the, maybe for religion, like sacrificing this animal is like so important. Maybe it is the only way. But we think that prolonging this kind of pain is something that is morally wrong, philosophically wrong, and more than that, like I said earlier on, we can actually change, and it is necessary for the religion as a whole. And that is why I am very proud to propose.